Alright, the quadratic formula we saw derived from the other video, which you may or may not have watched, but whether you've seen where it comes from or not, this formula here is a thing you need to memorise and be able to use. So if you have a quadratic equation that looks like this, x squareds and x's and something is 0, then the answer can be found by putting the values into this formula. So I'm going to do a few examples of how to do that, just so you get the habit right. Some things to be wary of, or just to help you out, it's useful if you remember to write down what a, b and c are for each equation. So here a is 3, b is -5, that's important and that's a take away, and c is 2. And then you just write these values into that formula. So that gets us x equals -b, so that's going to be negative -5, so just positive 5, plus or minus the square root of -5 squared, take away 4 times 3 times 2, all divided by 2 times 3. From here, that's just a calculation. You can do it in your head, or you can do it step by step. I'm going to use a calculator because it shows you two useful things. So this whole thing's a fraction, 5 plus root, bracket, -5, close bracket, squared, take 4 times 3 times 2 over 2 times 3. So I've just typed that in as it looks. I put brackets around my negatives because I don't trust calculators still to get the negatives right, so it's always helpful to do that. That gives you an answer. That comes out to be 1. Notice here this is plus or minus. As you know from factorising, you often get 2 brackets, therefore 2 answers. So this plus here, we need to also delete that and change to a minus to get the other value, or 2/3. And that's done. That's super quick and easy. There's your value. So the next one has a little catch that can trip people out. So b is clearly 4, c is clearly 10, a, you need to remember that's 1x squared, so a is 1. So we will do that again here. We're going to get minus, so x equals minus b, plus or minus the square root of b squared, take 4 times a times c, all over 2 times a. And that is going to spit out a maths error. So that's a math error. On a calculator, that means the thing you've typed, it can read. So it's not that you've mistyped it, it's that there's something, what you've asked it to do, it thinks is impossible. Well, why might that be? What things here are going on that might be impossible? There's a division, and if we were asking it to divide by 0, that would be a math error. 2 times 1 isn't 0, so that's not a problem. We've got adding, well, you can add anything, that's fine. It's this square root that might have the problem. So let's just, without doing all the steps, let's just see what this bit in the square root is. 4 squared is 16. So we've got 16 there. Take 4 times 10, take 40. Well, that is a negative number. Yeah? So we are asking this in the middle of this equation to work out the square root of -24. Now, as far as you're aware with the maths you've done so far, are there any numbers you can square that will get you a negative number? Well, the answer is not. So there are no numbers you can square root to get this. You can't square root this negative to get a value. So that means there are no real solutions. When you get the math error, just double check you haven't accidentally got a negative mixed up in here to make this negative by mistake. But if that is negative, there really are no real solutions, and that's real in the technical sense, because the solutions that exist really exist, they're just not in the real number line. And we'll look at that later in your mathematical careers, but that's a useful thing to be able to do. Alright, 2 more. A is 3, B is 7, and C, well, it isn't there, it's worth nothing. Now actually, I wouldn't bother using a formula for this because it's probably quicker to factorise. But if we are going to use the formula, we will get -7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared, take 4 times 3 times 0 all over 2 times 3. And that will get us, I'm going to write 49 rather than 7 squared. I'm going to take away 0 because I can do that. So you don't have to necessarily write out the whole thing. What I've typed in here is a slightly truncated form. 2 times 3 I know is 6, so I just type 6. Things like that can save you time, there's nothing wrong with that. But that does mean if you do that a lot, there's a risk you can make an error, like 2 times 3 is 5, and then you mess it up. So it's a risk, but it can save you time. We get 0. If I make that a subtract, we get negative 2 and a third. So, or negative 2 and a third. And finally, the one that's not like the others. This does not look like this. It's not equal to 0. So that means this formula won't work. You've got to do some work first. So if we take away 5x from both sides, we get 7x squared. Take 5x is 12. If we take away 12 from both sides, we get 7x squared. Take 5x, take 12 equals 0. And now I've got clearly A, B and C. So if I move on to this side of the page, if I move on to this side of the page, I think you didn't see that, so I'll go through that again. Because that isn't equal to 0, we took away 5x, we took away 12, and then we were left with 0 on the right hand side. So A is 7, B is negative 5, C is negative 12, so x is negative 5, so positive 5. So the square root of negative 5 squared, take 4 times 7 times negative 12, so put the bracket around there, all over 2 times 7, and that gives us 5 plus root 25 plus 4 times 7 times 12. Why have I put a plus in there? Because I know that negative times that negative gets me positive, and it just makes it quicker for me to type. 2 times 7. So I get 1 5/7, or maybe I'll subtract negative 1. There we go. And this formula will work for any values where solutions exist. If it doesn't have a real solution, it'll come up with an error which you can check. That is that.